Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast show for the average Joe, the Wrestling Diaries. I'm your host, Mitchell Roulane. Check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Overcast, Radio Public. I think I just got a big bulk of the majority of them. There's probably like a few there that I'm not remembering right now, but check this out. Listen to what we have to offer everyone out there in the world. Leave us a review, very important. Follow us, share our content. And if you want to see the video content, obviously, you go to YouTube, like, share, comment, and subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more content. We update all this stuff weekly. We do shows with people, and then periodically I do something called the spoken word sessions, which is just me spouting off literature that I have either written or someone has written and sent in to me. I did the last show. A friend of mine sent in some of her poetry, and I shared it. Today, I have a really good friend that I've been wanting to get on the show for the longest time. We've almost been running the show for one fiscal year, ladies and gentlemen, one full revolution around the sun. We've been doing the Wrestling Diaries, and I finally got my good friend and fellow team member and classmate from London Real Academy, Mr. Andy Whittle. And the crowd goes wild. What is up, brother?
I'm not bad. And yourself?
Doing well. I'm so glad to get you on the show. Like I was saying, man, it's been forever, a long time coming, right?
I think we've been organizing it for about 10 months.
Yeah. First, like I said, I've been doing the show for not quite a year yet. So yeah, basically when I started doing the podcast, it was right on the cusp of the end of our academy course. And yeah, you were one of the people that I'm trying to get on here, but schedules didn't align, and here we are, like 10 months later. I'm glad I could get you on, though, man.
No, I'm pleased to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
Andy, I want you to introduce yourself to everybody out there listening to this podcast about who you are, where you're at, more particularly, and what you do, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. So my name's Andy Whittle, as you know. I'm 36 years of age. I live in a small town just outside of London, west of London, called Slough. I've lived here all my life, haven't moved or anything. And basically, I work at Heathrow Airport, which is just down the road, just outside London. Very busy airport, obviously, up until what happened last year. I work for British Airways, main national airline of Britain, in the ground crew. So part of my role is obviously delivering baggage to the aircraft, backwards and forwards. I've just recently started my training program in loading, which is also loading the aircraft, which actually comes to an end next week. Other than that, I'm a full-blown conspiracy theorist, as you know, to a degree.
Yeah,
but I don't really venture into that much. But as you know, I've just started up my own podcast called Decoding the Dreamworld. And for many, many years since I was young, I've always been interested in non-physical phenomena, UFOs, that sort of stuff. The stuff that people don't really want to talk about, but actually there's plenty of evidence that it actually exists out there. And I just thought about doing something different that not many other people do, but to get the information out there so that the public can actually decide for themselves. Not me tell them how to think or what to think, but show them the evidence, give it to them, and then they can do what they want with it.
Cool. How did you get into doing the job that you do now at the airport? How long have you been doing that? And what made you want to do that?
Well, I've always been a bit of a plane geek since I was. I used to, when I was young, I used to get taken up the airport by my dad. We used to plane spot and things like that. And I've seen Concorde and the 747, all these different aircraft flying in low over where I live. I was just really, really interested. But the way my career went, because I started off in retail, so I was always selling things to people. I didn't really consider the airport, but I needed the shift work because of the different start and finish times for obviously childcare with my daughters. Since I've moved there, it's been a breath of fresh air, because not only as it helped me as a person, it also helped with doing things like the podcast and obviously the business course last year. And so, yeah, it's really looking good.
Nice. And so for people wondering, and we kind of touched on this a little bit at the beginning. So you and I were in this Business Accelerator course sponsored by a company called London Real, which was a podcast. And then it became like a media business type school, and then a bunch of other things. And we got into it, and we were in the same kind of group together, you and I.
Yeah.
And I've always actually wondered how did you come across London Real and all that stuff and get into the accelerator program? Like, what was your origin story? You might have told that when we were still in it, but I don't remember specifically if that's the case.
Okay, so what happened was literally just before the COVID lockdown happened, I was sat at work on YouTube going through my phone, and I saw some of Brian Rose's videos.
Mm-hmm.
I started listening to some of the podcasts, and they were really, really good. And then what happened was, obviously, the lockdown then come about at the end of March, and I was just sat at home. And I was thinking, well, we're going to be in lockdown now. We didn't know how long it was going to be and how long I was going to be out of work for. But it turned out that it was 2 months in the end. And literally, I put one of Brian Rose's podcasts on, and up flipped the advert for Business Accelerator. And literally, I followed all the links, had a look at it, had to think about it, had a look at how much it was. Just thought, yeah, why not give it a go? Because I'd always wanted to have my own podcast, to get my voice on the internet, to talk. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. And literally, I thought that this would be a really good way of doing it. Now, if you remember, with the actual courses, there was 4 courses, wasn't there? And there was the podcast one. I think it was Broadcast Yourself.
Yeah.
And actually, I went for that one, but when I had the phone call with them to see whether it was the right thing to do, they actually mentioned to me the Business Accelerator one, because according to them, all you were doing in the podcasting one was learning how to podcast. There wasn't the business structure behind it, of how to earn money, all that sort of stuff. So, and that's how literally I enrolled on the Business Accelerator.
Oh, okay. Yeah, my story's kind of crazy. I actually found London Real through 2 other people that influencers and people that I was following, and it was Greg Braden. I don't know if you know who that is. He's written a bunch of like what is it, meta science, metaphysics books about like spirituality and science being the same thing, and he's just a very insightful person. Even if you don't agree with some of his text, he's brilliant. And so I have his book. I have a couple of his books, The God Code and The Divine Matrix and stuff like that. And they're really good reads for anybody out there that likes that kind of stuff. And then also Robert Kiyosaki. You know, I looked into him because I was trying to find different ways to make money on my own, make my own money and stuff like that. And well, Greg Braden was on an episode of London Real. So when I was like researching Greg Braden and all that stuff, one of the things that came up was him being on London Real. So I watched the show, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. This is cool. And that was my first, I guess, introduction to London Real and Brian Rose and whatnot. And then after that, the Robert Kiyosaki thing, I was following him, and then he was on London Real, and he was talking about how Brian was doing a really great thing, and he was helping change a lot of people's lives. And then one of Robert Kiyosaki's like students or something actually went through the accelerator course. And then I was like, well, if Robert Kiyosaki is vouching for this, let me take a look at it. So I looked in a little bit deeper, and then I was like, you know, I don't know so much about this, but I'm living the kind of life now to where I don't like, I take chances. I throw caution in the wind sometimes. You know, I'm tired of being like, oh, I don't know about this, I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to do it. And if I f up, if I lose money, if it whatever, who cares? I've learned something, right? You got to fall to learn to pick yourself back up after all. And so, and that's how I got into it. And it was very, very beneficial, man, because it really helped expand my knowledge of internet business, digital business, but then also it, more importantly to me personally, even it created a network for me with other people around the globe. You obviously, like, I wouldn't know you right now. We wouldn't be having this conversation, and we wouldn't have had that talk on the phone that one time where we talked for, what did we clock in at? 4 hours, 4.5 hours, you and I?
Yeah, it was nearly 4 hours, and we still had plenty of material, I think, to carry on.
Oh, sure. Yeah. But I think you had to go to bed, or I had to go to bed. Somebody had to go to bed because we were up for a long time talking. Yeah. It's funny because before that, my record was with Dr. Mohan, and we talked for 3 hours. So I think we eclipsed that one by an hour. I remember him talking to me after that, and he was like, "Oh, shit." He's like, "Now I got to talk to you for 5 hours so I can beat Andy." And I was like, "Yeah, have a party with a doc." But yeah, I need to get him on here. I haven't talked to Dr. Mo in a little bit. He's been real busy and got a lot of stuff going on, but I haven't chatted with him. But so what did you were saying earlier about before we started this, about like stuff going on? What is going on with London Real Now and Brian Rose? I want to go into that story. Like, what's these meltdowns? Because I haven't been keeping up with it.
What's happened is, so we finished the business course, and obviously he had the digital freedom platform,
right?
And everyone was putting all this money into the fund and all this stuff. And then obviously he went and created the website for the digital freedom platform and started putting all the videos on it. Then out the blue in September came this, he wanted to try this, putting these people into a house, and they had to create their own digital content.
Was it like a reality show?
Yeah, it was like well, that just disappeared off the face of the earth.
Yeah, they sent me an audition for that. They sent me an application to do an audition for it. I didn't do it, but they emailed me one for that.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it disappeared off the face of the planet.
Okay.
Then there was like all these people coming out of the woodwork. So you've got like the guy CoffeeZilla on YouTube. You've got Rebel Wisdom. They started making videos asking the questions as to where's all the money gone? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he created the platform, he's got the money. There was about £1.6 million. Where's it all gone? Right?
Yeah.
So then we got to about November, and what he's done is he launched his London mayoral bid to be the London mayor.
Yeah, I remember seeing that.
In order to do that, you have to put down a £10,000 bargaining chip.
Mm-hmm.
Which if you fail to get, I think it's something like 5 or 10% of the vote, you don't get that back. But what he's been doing is, and you probably haven't seen it, but he's hired this bus and he's driving around London with all these cameras and all this sort of stuff. And this costs money.
Yeah, bad.
Where did he get the money from? Well, clearly it must be the digital freedom platform.
Yeah.
And Rebel Wisdom and CoffeeZilla are just knocking these videos out left, right, and centre. Right. He made a bit of a boo-boo as well, because he likes his martial arts, and he records himself doing the all the stuff and that, the nunchucks and all that stuff.
Yeah.
He made some really silly videos of himself, and I think the general public, they weren't going to vote for him anyway. But but at the end of the day, he did look rather silly. But the killer was, he started doing promotional stuff to be the mayor. So obviously he has to face the public in order to be their mayor.
Right.
He wants to show to them, like any politician, that he's the guy that's going to save London, right? So there was this group of teenagers that run a podcast over here in the UK. I think it's based in London. It's on YouTube. It's totally on YouTube.
You don't know what the name of it is?
They interviewed Brian Rose, right? Mm-hmm. And he said specifically on camera, I'm going to talk to you for about half hour to 45 minutes, right?
Yeah.
One of them asked him a question about the digital freedom platform.
Yeah.
Now remember, last summer he's talking about honesty and being transparent and keeping this digital platform for free speech, right? What he did was, when this child, I don't know how old he is, 13, 14, something like that,
Yeah.
all of them are they're very articulate in how they speak and how they run the podcast. And they were all hitting him with questions. Where did the money go? You had your digital freedom platform. Well, halfway through it, Brian Rose has gone, look, I can't do this anymore. I've got other engagements to be. Well, you told them at the start that you were going to be there for 30 minutes to 45 minutes. And then about 15 minutes in, he's cut it off. But what he did was you understand YouTube probably better than I do because of how long you've been using your podcast, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
But what he did was he, at the same time as they were recording the podcast, he's actually gone in somewhere. I don't know if it was on Zoom or YouTube or something like that, and clicked a box to say that what they were doing was violating the YouTube standards code or something like that. So essentially what he's done is he's taken the actual podcast off of them by saying it's not their legal copy, by literally just ticking a box. I don't know. I don't know how he's done it. I'm only going on the words that they've said, but they tried putting the video onto, I think it was YouTube or something like that, and they couldn't do it because something violated their rules and regulations. And Brian Rose is one of these guys. He knows how social media and that works inside out. And I think at the same time as obviously portraying himself as this great, freedom of speech person, YouTube's coming after me, all these people are coming after me, he's actually used it towards his advantage as well.
Yeah.
And now he's disappeared because I haven't seen any videos from him on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, whatever. I think he's probably done that to actually have a rethink about where he goes next, because I think the net is actually closing in on him. There's a lot of people that are disgruntled with him, and that you probably don't know, but there's a group on Facebook of about 300 people that want a refund from him for the courses.
Yeah, I think I saw the page for that actually, and that was I think I saw that page when I was in the course. I was in the course, yeah, and I was like, oh, what's this all about? Back then, it had just barely 100 people on it. Now, it's obviously tripled since then. So apparently, I'm assuming that you're not as big of a Brian Rose and London Real fan anymore than Andy. Is that safe to say?
I am a fan of his podcasting. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I've listened to some of these videos from CoffeeZilla and Rebel Wisdom. I mean, quite interestingly, Rebel Wisdom had Nick Gabriel on, the guy who actually set up London Real with Brian Rose.
His old partner when it first started. Yeah.
And he actually spoke at length about how Brian Rose got rid of him. And what it was, they were really, really pally, and they were doing this podcast, and then it started getting a bit more professional. And some of the ideas that Nick Gabriel wanted to do with it, Brian Rose didn't want to do. And then all of a sudden, one day, he just said, "That's it. I don't want you here anymore." And what Nick Gabriel's saying is in terms of Brian Rose, obviously he had his drug problem, which he was quite open about. What he's saying is he feels that Brian has created a creature, a different alter ego to the real Brian. So you do see the real Brian wanting to do wondrous things with his London Real, but then this other alter ego takes over because he's power hungry. And that's one of the reasons I think he wanted to be London Mayor. This egotism has got to him. And I think that we're starting to see some of the true colours coming through now with him.
So do you know what the deal with the graduation thing is? Like what's that all about? Like, is that still a thing? Our graduating class?
It's still a thing, because I sent, I mean, obviously they put it back in July. There's the the message in the Facebook group about putting it back to March.
Okay.
We received nothing from London Real. I think what had happened is the whole focus of London Real had moved onto his mayor bid.
Yeah, his political.
All other business, even though he's got all these courses still running in the background, he's trying to run for London Mayor at the same time. So everything has just been on the back burner. But I did email them the other week, and they've said that you just need to watch this space, because obviously we don't know over here yet what it entails in the summer, whether there's going to be another lockdown or it's going to be open or what. But I'm sure they'll let us know as soon as they know more.
Okay, cool. Well, how about that? For all of our teammates that are going to listen to this episode, hi, everybody. Hi, Team Billhorn. You guys better be listening to this. We're your pals here. Yeah, so that's information if anybody didn't know. There you go. That's about as great. We all should just get together just amongst ourselves, regardless of our graduation or not. That'd be really great for us all to meet each other and mingle. Like that would be really cool and very important. Yeah, that's what I love about doing this podcast, because I've been able to mingle with just about all of you through this medium, to like talk to you and see you, and that's been very important to me, just because I feel like I've made a lot of friends. I assume that there might be some people, if they're listening, they're like, Mitchell's not my friend. He's just some guy I knew on this internet thing. I'm talking about you, Dunya. I'm kidding. I love you, Dunya. Yeah. Well, anyway, so you said earlier that you have 3 daughters. Can we talk about that? You're a dad of 3 daughters. 2 daughters. I'm sorry, 2 daughters. Yeah. Those are the only kids you have? Just two girls, no sons?
Two girls.
Okay. How old are they?
Well, Maisie's 8 and Ivy is 2.
Ivy, cool. Love that name, man. For Halloween, she could be Poison Ivy.
Well,
Batman.
You say that. It's quite funny, because she's actually got the ginger hair with it.
Oh, really?
So yeah, so I'm thinking of getting a green costume, and we call her Poison Ivy.
Hell yeah, man! That'd probably be her nickname when she's going to school and stuff. Call her Poison Ivy.
I'm sure she'll dislike that.
Yeah, maybe she'll end up meeting a guy named Bruce.
Match made in heaven.
Hell yeah, man. So let's talk more about you. Now you're getting into podcasting finally at long last, when you posted that in our group message that we have on Facebook. Yep. I saw it and I was super excited, because I know you've been talking about it for a while, especially after we wrapped up with London Real last year, and then you finally got it off the ground. Tell me and tell everyone listening about how that went about. Like what made you finally get it going, and what took so long?
Well, obviously, with everything that's going on, I had a lot going on with my daughters, the lockdown, work, with the lockdown at work, it was putting me in a bit of a position, because they were moving my shifts around. So I'm getting later and earlier. And by the time I come home from work, I'm trying to concentrate. What do I do next? Etc. etc. And then I got up to a point about 2 months ago, and I thought, well, I'm going to do this. We're going to do it. So I just started focusing on research. What do I want to do for my first episode? What is it that I need to do? Had the plan for where I want it to go, what I want it to be about, and then just off the cuff, I created the first episode. I come across this book that I'd heard of 10 years ago, and it's I am allowed to say the book's name, am I?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, definitely.
So there's a book called Proof of Heaven, and it's about a neurosurgeon who contracted meningitis, and it caused him to slip into a coma, very, very sick, and he had a near-death experience. But the thing with the near-death experience is his brain was damaged in the neocortex, where all dreams happen, where basically we happen. And mainstream science were baffled about whether this was a dream or not. But how can it be a dream when this part of his mind had actually shut down due to the meningitis? So he was in a coma for 7 days, and it wasn't good. It didn't seem like he was going to come around. But of course, while all this is going on, and the family are holding a vigil around his bed, he's actually gone somewhere on this journey. And it's a very interesting read. I recommend it to anyone that's actually listening, because the thing with it is, it's not just the fact that he's in the coma. You actually hear about what his family went through and what they were going through at the time, where he might not come back. And if he actually woke from this coma, is he actually going to be all right? Because when people go into comas, there's not many that survive them with this particular type of meningitis that he had. But what was interesting was he came back from it. He woke up with this interesting story of where he went. And not only that, he came back as an even better person in himself than he was before he left.
Wow.
And he's now, for the last 10 years, gone on a speaking tour of actually talking about this book. It was a #1 bestseller, New York Times bestseller. He's got his own website, but his name's Eben Alexander. You might have heard of him.
Mm-hmm.
It's been translated into, I think, about 43 languages, this book.
Wow.
But not only that, what it's done is it's spawned more people to come forward with near-death experiences. One of the things that he's actually mentioned is in the 1960s, a lot of people before this particular time period in the 60s would just die. They would develop a heart problem or something like that, and they would just slip away because there was no way of actually keeping them alive once they'd had a heart attack.
Yeah.
And then this particular procedure was actually created. I've forgotten the name of it. And more people were surviving heart attacks. What actually came with that? Well, more near-death experiences, because these people were slipping away gradually whilst the body was shutting down. But then this procedure was put in place to actually keep the body alive, and they were actually coming back, and then they had a story to tell. And what it's done is it's spawned all these many thousands of stories all over the world for the last 50, 60 years of this theme, this same theme that people seem to have. And it's very, very interesting, because not only does it open up the world of what the near-death experience is, it actually opens up things like reincarnation. Do we actually come back as someone else? That sort of thing. Out-of-body experience. People have had out-of-body experiences where they're actually in the operating theatre looking down on their body being operated on. And they're like, well, how can I do that? You know, there's no official science out there that can explain it. One of the things that I found, Mitchell, is that mainstream science wants to bury all this because they don't want to talk about it. Because what it does is it opens up our world as something else. Because if this near-death experience is true, and it can happen to any one of us, yeah, what is this world? What is it exactly? Is it solid? Is it more fluid than we think it is? You know, and very, very interesting.
Yeah, it sounds super interesting.
And this is the sort of stuff. This is the sort of stuff where I want to take the podcast, because already I've had people talking to me about wanting to come on my podcast and actually talk about their near-death experience.
Yeah,
I've had two people already talk to me about their near-death experience, and it's very, very similar to the one that Eben Alexander had, which would lead me to say that if these people are actually experiencing the same things, there's more to this than meets the eye. Because if they're just merely creating it within their consciousness. Is it true? We don't know. It's down to the scientists to actually develop techniques to actually test this.
Yeah. Now, your first episode is about you kind of give a summary of that book and what you interpret it as, and you're just giving the information of the book. But you also said in going forward that you're actually going to start having guests, and like you just said before, you've talked to 2 other people that have had near-death experiences, that have had similar kind of weird, unexplainable spiritual happenings and stuff like that. So are you going to have these people on your podcast for future episodes?
I'm going to try and get as many people on as I can. I'm in the process of discussing it with them, but they're very, very shy. So I'm going to need to have to either do it via video like we are now, or maybe just record the audio and do it that way. I'm in negotiations with them at the minute.
Negotiations, I love it.
Yeah. But we'll see. But it's something that I definitely want to do, because then the general public can actually listen to people's stories about what has actually happened to them.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I would listen to that all day long. That stuff fascinates me to no end. I'll spend all day thinking about it, researching it, talking about it. It's really cool stuff. It's super cool stuff. I feel like this world and all of us, we are a lot more than just the solid mass of flesh and bone. Like there's something so much more happening here. And I feel like to deny that is, I don't know. I feel like to deny true humanity, that there is more meaning. Like this is not all an accident. This is not just, there is some purpose, there's some plan. There's another book, the autobiography of Albert Einstein. If anybody ever wanted to take the patience to read this book, I mean, it's like larger than the Bible. But I've actually, at one point in my life, I just had a lot of downtime, and I have this book. And, Albert Einstein was generally in his earlier days, especially in his career and as a young man, he's a professed atheist. He didn't believe in, an afterlife or a God or heaven or hell or anything spiritual whatsoever. Everything is solid. Everything is scientific. And he said there's no, research about anything that is supernatural or metaphysical or anything like that. And then as time went on, through his studies, he got further along after he'd already came to the States, and he came up with the theory of relativity and all these things. He had wrote in some of his notes, he said that, the more I study the stars and the universe and everything encapsulating us, he's like, it's almost completely hard for me to completely deny the fact that there is, in fact, some central intelligence that purposefully has everything like working and building towards something. He's like, because if you study, he was like, in studying like the universe and studying physics and stuff, what I've noticed as a scientist is that everything always goes towards harmony in life. No matter how much chaos, no matter how many things happen, life always reverts back to harmony.
Yeah.
And he said, he's like, because of that shows that there's some kind of like, there's some intelligent work there. There's not some semblance of chance or random luck. He's like, because something has to operate something for it to go towards a harmonious outcome. And he's like, and if you study anything, everything, no matter how chaotically it breaks down, it always reverts back to harmony at some point. He was like, the sun, what is it? Rises in the west, sets in the east, or maybe it's the opposite. I don't know if I'm getting that right. And he says, the way the tides flow a certain way, the earth is just close enough to the sun that it gives warmth and life to a planet, but not too close that burns up and not too far away that it freezes. And like, why is everything, gravity is perfectly sound for where we're at. And he was like, there's too many things that are unexplainable that don't add up scientifically, mathematically, for things to just be chance and there not to be some border outside of what we can see and what we can study. And he was like, maybe it's just because we haven't evolved enough to really understand where we're at. He's like, but it's hard for me to deny that there is some central intelligence responsible for everything going on in life and in the world. And he's like, now what that is, that's where you can question religion. Is it like, what, is it the God of the Bible, or is it, the Eastern people's religion? Like, what? Then you can debate that. He was like, but I feel like there's no way at this point that I can deny some central intelligence, some central consciousness to everything.
Yeah.
He's like, I just don't know what it
Mm.
is. And I read that and I was like, holy shit. I did not expect to get this out of Albert Einstein, but I was reading that and I was like, damn. And I wish I would have dog tagged it or highlighted the page. The book is so damn big, but at the time, I wasn't thinking about that stuff. I just read it and was like, oh wow, how insightful. And then like as time went on, I would think about that passage from that book and him saying that. And one thing I was going to ask you too, why did you choose, what is it about decoding dreams? What turns you on about that? Why is that important to you? Dreams and stuff like that.
Well, as I said to you, I'm just interested in the non-physical phenomena. I've always had an interest in it and how it interweaves with the fabric of our reality and things like that. What do people actually experience? How that affects others, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Been quite interesting what you just said about Albert Einstein. There was the great Serbian American scientist called Nikola Tesla as well. He made the statement, which was I actually put in the podcast. He said that if you were to look at non-physical phenomena, what was it again? I'll get it in a minute. Yeah, if you were to research non-physical phenomena, you would make more discoveries in a decade than in all the previous centuries. Something along them lines. So what he's basically saying is all the main body of science, the discoveries that they've made over the many centuries, they haven't looked at non-physical phenomena. Okay. Now, non-physical phenomena is interwoven into all them other things that they've discovered, right? What he's basically saying is in one decade, you'll make more discoveries about our reality in this world than they've made in all the many centuries going back in mainstream science. And I think that's phenomenal because Tesla died in 1943. So what that says to me is the late 1800s, when he was operating in the early 20th century, somebody knew all this stuff already. And clearly it's been suppressed right up until modern day.
Yeah.
I think they suppress stuff because they don't want us to know the real truth about life. They want to keep us in the 3D 5 sense world when there's all this other stuff going on.
Why do you think they would want to do that, though? What would be their main agenda, though? Like, what would we do with that knowledge?
I think really it all bows down to we're all connected as the human race. And I think by keeping us divided, it keeps everything at bay. They want us to believe that there's these divisions in the world. Yeah, you're only supposed to know this. Of course, when they dangle the carrot and we take the carrot, yeah, and then we look at it and go, oh, there's more to this than meets the eye. It'll open up this vast world. And what I mean by the vast world is the spiritual world, the non-physical world, everything, even the stars. So that's been, I don't know if you know about NASA and all that sort of stuff, but that's been suppressed for many, many years. And it's all linked. Everything is linked. And what I found interesting was when I was studying for the first podcast, I found these studies that people had done. And in this particular study, they looked at 40 years of research within the non-physical phenomena. What they found was, in terms of near-death experience, was that when it come to trying to work out why these people are seeing these things and going on a journey with their near-death experience, they were looking at it as phenomena. They weren't actually looking at the relationship between our consciousness and the mind. There's very little study done into that. And of course, the brain is an apparatus that allows our consciousness into the body. So essentially it's being, well, when you look at it, it appears to be, it's being beamed in. Our brain is a receiver from elsewhere. Okay, if that makes sense. So it's a bit like, the obviously the radio. You've got the dial, and you move it, and there's different radio stations on the frequency. Yeah. Well, this frequency is set to one where our consciousness comes through the brain and allows us to live within this reality. Okay. Now you would think that obviously if this is going on, where people are having near-death experiences where, you know, they're falling into comas and all of a sudden they're dreaming or whatever about going back home as such, heaven, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
You would think that mainstream science would want to look at that and study that. But no, they just treat it as phenomena. And as I say, this study, and there's a link for it actually in the YouTube episode of the first episode, where it shows you, and it started to pick up a little bit. There are mainstream scientists that are like, hold on, hang on, we're going to look at something different, and they've started to look at it, but it's so many years behind that they're playing catch up.
Yeah. Also, another on the argument on the other side of this, I've heard a scientist once speak when they were talking about people looking into spirituality and things unexplainable by science and all these things, is that they were like, oh, well, how do you explain these things? And the scientist was like, well, what's happening here is that people innately, we are built to want more purpose and belonging for what we are. Like we want to feel like there's something more to our lives and our world. And he's like, and there's not, but we want it to be. So what we do is we go searching, and, you know, it's like the seek ye and ye find. Well, sometimes the things that you're finding, you'll find whatever you want to find. It's just like whatever truth you're seeking, you'll find, even if it's not really true. And he was saying he feels like people that look into stuff like this, that's just what they're doing. Like they're tricking themselves into believing that there's these things that don't exist, they're not real, because they can't accept their own personal mortality. Like, this is it. We're just these flesh bags. We're like basically like stardust parasites with meat on our bones, running around, sucking up resources. And we can't accept the fact that we are not special. And then when we're gone, we're gone. And so we hang on to these hopes and these fairy tales. And that's what he said about concepts and stuff like this. What would you say to that guy, to that scientist that made that statement?
Well, what I would say is he's quite wide off the mark, but at the same time as being wide off the mark, this is the conversations that people need to have. You know, specifically in the case of Ibn Alexander, you know, he's gone to this place, he's had his experience, he come back. What was interesting about when he came back was he brought healing back with him. Now, what I'm trying to say is his body, brainstem was damaged by the meningitis, and so was the neocortex in his brain, right? When he came back and he woke up from the coma, it took a couple of weeks, but he was completely right as rain. He was fit. And mainstream science can't explain how the brainstem and the neocortex repaired itself. There's another book out there by a lady called Anita Morjani, and it's called Dying to Be Me. I actually quoted that in the podcast. She had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, cancer of the lymph nodes.
Yeah, Jesus.
That's a very dodgy cancer because it's hard to treat. Now, she had the very same experience as Dr. Alexander, where she slipped into a coma because of problems to do with her non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Yeah.
She had this experience, and she spoke about this, like Eben Alexander did, this life review, where you get to experience all the feelings that others felt due to your actions. Now, I find that crazy, right? That's crazy. But you actually go through a life review of everything that you've done, and you actually get to feel how that other person felt when you put them in a situation. And that's just mad. But what was interesting was she was told by something that she had to come back. When she come back, she woke up out of the coma, and the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma had gone.
Wow.
And there's nothing in science that can explain it. Nothing at all. And that's what I would say to that doctor. Forget, oh, we're meat, we're bone, we're this, that, and the other. Listen to the stories of the people, because they're the ones experiencing it. There's nothing within science yet that can explain why this happened. There could be a branch of science that you or I don't even know about. The scientists don't even know about that can explain it. And I went into this in the episode, because what you have to do is, Mitchell, is you have to look at every angle. Yeah, I
agree.
I know I probably sounded like I'm on one side. I'm not. I would rather everything gets tested, everything gets studied, and then definitively at some point they say, well, this is what we think, and then they just go with it. And then more and more people will accept once they've actually explained certain things. I don't think you're ever gonna know 100% what it's all about. I think that the only way you're gonna know is obviously at the end of your life, or if you have a near-death experience.
I was about to say, you'll know when you're dead, but then you can't tell anybody. Maybe, I don't know. You could come back from the grave and be like, "Whoa, this is the meaning of life, everybody." I don't know. Yeah, man, I'm right there with you. This it's 100% fascinating, and for people that, even people that don't subscribe to it, for you not to find it fascinating, I just feel like you're like a rock, you're a mannequin or something. This stuff is super interesting. It's super, super interesting to me. Have you ever encountered anything super crazy, supernatural in your lifetime?
Yeah,
Any story that stands out specifically that you wanted to share?
How long you got?
Well, just explain one of the ones that summarize one of the ones that you encountered. Let's hear about it.
Okay, so about 10 years ago, so we're looking around 2010, when I was working in retail. We had this office right in the middle of the retail store, where Monday, Wednesday, Friday, from what I can remember, we used to go and stand in the office. We had all the information that we needed. We'd have a manager's meeting and just discuss what's going on with each department.
Yeah.
And I got there quite early, because I liked to get in there and get prepared, instead of walking in at the last minute and being the one that everyone has a moan at because you're last in, that sort of thing.
Sure.
And literally, I'm stood there, and there was about 3 or 4 people in there. And bearing in mind, there's no windows on this office. It's literally a square.
Yeah.
And it's probably just slightly bigger than the room that I'm in now, so it's quite tiny. And you could probably fit about 10 people in it. And I'm just stood there minding my own business, and out the corner of my eye, my left eye, I saw this speck of blue light, and I've turned quickly like that, and I've caught it, and literally in the fabric of reality, this little sort of porthole was opened up with blue light coming out of it, and out of it come this butterfly, and it was a full-blown butterfly. And do you think anyone will believe me when I tell them?
I mean,
all the people in the room, and where'd that come from? They're like, what? Where'd that come from?
Yeah.
I didn't say a word to them, yeah, but it started flapping all around the room. What we had to do was get a jar and put it in the jar, and then take it to the warehouse and throw it out. But it was this black butterfly with pretty little colours on the wings.
Yeah.
And it was just going around, but literally it just came out of nowhere with this blue light behind it, and this thing just shut up, and it just started floating around. And I was like, wow.
So listen, real carefully to what I'm about to say, because it's very important. So I'm not saying I don't believe you. I'm a skeptic and a cynic, but I also am a very outside the box thinker. So I essentially feel like I could believe just about everything or not believe anything at all. But with me saying this, the cynic in me would say a couple of explanations for this before we get to the point where that actually did happen. What were you drinking that day? How much pot were you smoking? How much acid did you drop? Also, how much sleep did you get? And then behind that, what if maybe there was the sun came in and there's a weird crack in the window and there's like a blue tint and it shot in your eye and the light got in your eye and then a butterfly got in there. Nobody saw it. Somehow they left a door open. It flew in there. And then it just all happened simultaneously to seem like it came out of a portal from another dimension. So
there's no there's no windows in there.
Oh, okay. No windows. Okay.
There's literally it's literally just an office.
So let me ask this other question. Did anybody else see this blue light that you saw, or were you the only one that saw it?
No, because literally where we were, literally that wall over there where I saw out of my left eye, there was no one there. As I say, there was 4 people in the room, including me.
Yeah, but they saw the butterfly.
They saw the butterfly, but after it had come out the hole, they're like, where'd that come from?
Yeah.
Because I shut up then, because if I'd said, well, it just come out of nowhere over there.
Right. Okay. So my question to you is, if you weren't super high on drugs that day, what is your explanation for what it was? What happened? If you give your uneducated opinion about what you think, your guesstimation about what it was, where'd that butterfly come from? And what was the blue light?
Even Alexander spoke about where he went. He went to this wondrous valley with all these pretty colours, with colours that were brighter than the brightest rainbow that you ever seen on Earth. And he said there were animals there, creatures, birds, butterflies. He said that he was actually on a butterfly's wing, floating around in this valley.
Yeah, that's in the book.
It's his awareness. It's his consciousness. It's not actually him. There's no body. All he can see is what's ahead of him. And I think that the butterfly come from somewhere, and I was meant to see it. Someone maybe sent it, because they say that butterflies, robins, these sort of things are sent by long past people to let you know that they're okay. Yeah. I've heard that before, going back many years, but even I can't explain that. And of course, you can only best guess about where it is, where it's come from. What is actually behind what we see with our eyes. I don't know. But it's one of them things that I was there and I saw it, and no one's going to take that away from me because it happened.
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy, dude. If you weren't super fucking loaded that day and that happened, that is insane. That's blowing my mind. I got to feel like there's some people listening to this right now. Some of my more skeptical friends are like, whatever. This crazy. These people from England are crazy.
Oh, well.
I'm kidding. Well, they might. I don't know. I don't know what the I'm saying, man. But that's wild, dude. It's what's more wild, though, right? Is here's what I'd like to say to people: if that absolutely real, a portal literally opens up like out of a science fiction movie, and a butterfly or a bird or something like comes through it, or a portal opens up and you see yourself 10 years in the future or something. I feel like I probably just wouldn't even say anything to anybody, because the logical part of me, like I'm a very pragmatic, very logistical person, would be like, here's the thing. I know what I saw I know what I saw, and it's crazy. I wasn't on drugs. I wasn't hallucinating. I don't have a traumatic brain injury, but I can't tell people, because I know like nobody is going to even if they say they believe me, maybe they're like, oh, he's crazy. So I might just keep it to myself. And I wonder how many people out there in the world exist like that have happened. They even hear these stories and they're like, oh, that happened to me this many times. But I'm not going to tell people, because I don't even know if I believe myself. Plus, I don't know if they would believe me, and they just shut up about it. And I sit there and wonder what that number of people is.
Quite interestingly, though, as I detailed in the podcast. When you speak to the healthcare professionals at the hospital, the nurses, so like for instance the nurses in the ICU, the intensive care unit, nurses at hospice where people go to die, even nurses on the regular wards at hospitals, they actually mention that when you see a body in a coma, um, it's always different to someone just laying there asleep. What I mean by that is that there seems to be a presence there. You can see a body, someone just laying there asleep, and you can see them breathing, but you can feel the presence that the person is there. But what they say is when people go into a coma, it doesn't feel like there's a presence there, even though they're still alive.
Yeah.
And there's other people as well that have said they've been in the room when a relative is about to pass. And obviously when you see that body moving, it's breathing, then all of a sudden it starts to slow down and slow down and slow down. They've actually said that they've seen a presence sort of leave the body, like a soul leaving the body. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm sure there's scientists that have done research into that. But I did see something that said that the body is always 20 grams lighter after death than it was before. So I don't know, but I find that quite interesting as well.
Wow. I'm going to tell you one story of mine that's mine isn't, because you were awake, you were conscious with your butterfly blue light thing. This story I'm going to tell is actually when I was asleep dreaming, but I've had dreams that were pretty real to where I questioned the reality of it before, but there is no dream I've ever had that was more real than this one. I'll share the story, and then after that, we're gonna wrap it up. Man, you got me talking about all this bullshit. I'm supposed to be asking you what you wrestle with. It's coming. But I'm gonna share the story, and then we'll get a little bit deeper about personal stuff. So a handful of years ago, I was me and one of my ex-girlfriends. We were staying with my mother at the time. And I had this own room, and me and my girl, we were asleep. And leading up to this, I'll tell this story real quick. When I was a kid, I used to love to study like mythological things and ancient stuff, and I'd studied a lot of stuff about druids and ancient peoples and stuff like that. And I fell across studying stuff about the astral plane. You ever heard of that? There's a lot of books on that, but it was believed that the astral plane is just this other dimension. It's a plane that could be here, but it's just not perceivable. It's like you were talking about, we're like 3-dimensional. Well, this might be like the 4th dimension or 5th dimension or something, a dimension that we are not aware of. And these ancient peoples believe that sometimes when you sleep, your spirit, your essence comes out of your body and it travels around this plane, the astral plane, your astral projection, which may in fact be your spirit, your soul. And you fly around, and you're in this other realm, this other dimension, but it could still be here. It's just in another dimension or something. I don't know. It's been so long since I looked at all this stuff, but anyways, I'd studied about it, so I kind of knew about this, and I just had it in the back of my brain. There's never anything I ever used this information for. It was just useless, just useless knowledge that I had for a while. Anyways, fast forwarding. So I'm having this dream. I have a theory behind it. This is why I said that at the beginning of this. So I'm at my mom's house with my ex-girlfriend. We were asleep. It's in the middle of the night. And I wake up, but I'm dreaming. But in the dream, this is like pretty real. And like the mannerisms of everything. I remember getting out of the bed. I was wearing exactly what I was wearing. I was probably in my undergarments. Pull the covers off. I'm going to the restroom, to go take a piss or whatever. And throw some pants on. Then in the dream, I remember thinking, I want to go visit my brother. Now, to explain my mom's house, she has like a big home, and then she has a yard, and then behind her backyard is another smaller miniature house. And, it has its own little yard and property, and then she owns that. And for years, she would rent that out to, tenants. Well, at this time period in that, my brother and his wife and family were living there for the time being. And so he lived out there, so I would go out there and hang out with him sometimes. And the way to access his house was 2 ways. You could either go through my mom's backyard, and their back door connected to her backyard. So you could either come through their back door, or to the right, there was a fence, and you'd go through the fence, and then you'd be in his front yard, and then you could go to his front door. Right. And so, or the other way to access it was my mom lived, there was an alleyway, a small little alley in between her and the house next to her. And in this alley, it's just a small little roadway, and you go back there, and there's like a smaller little area back here with other houses, and there's like this little street light up. And I had been out there many times before, and I had seen, what I knew what it looked like and all that. So in the dream, in my head, I was like, oh, I need to go talk to my brother. I borrowed something from him I got to take back, or maybe he has something of mine. I don't remember exactly what it was, but this was real life. Like, because when I was awake, this was an actual thing, right? But in the dream, I was using, and I was like, oh, I'll go do it. And I was like, I could go through the back door, which would be easier, and I don't have to worry about going out in the street this late at night, because my mom kind of lives in a questionable part of the city that can be kind of dangerous. Okay. Not super dangerous, but like, you don't necessarily want to be walking around out in the area that she lives in necessarily. And, excuse me. So I was like, I could go through the backyard, make the best amount of sense. It would be the fastest way. But my mom has all these dogs. And if I go out there, they're going to start barking. And if they bark, they're going to wake her up, and it's going to piss her off and all that. And I don't want to deal with all that. So I'm just going to take the alleyway. Now, granted, around the time frame of this was probably about somewhere between 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. in the morning. And so I was like, all right, I'll go through the door. So I'm putting on my pants and shirt and all the stuff like I normally would, going out the front door. I lock it back, with my keys. So I go around the alley, and I remember the way it looked outside is the way it would look at this time of night. You could see the stars in the sky. I could feel the cold, cool air. And I was like, man, I should have brought a jacket. It's kind of chilly out here. I look up, and there's the street light that's always there, and sometimes it kind of flickers in and out. And I can see little moths and gnats flying around it like it normally would be in real life. And so I'm walking there. I can smell the grass, and I can smell the air. I can smell, the dog pen next to me as I'm walking by. And I'm going around to my brother's house. I'm knocking on his door. He doesn't answer. I knock. I wait for a little bit. I don't see any lights on. I'm like, oh, the lights are off. He's obviously asleep. Usually he stayed up really late. That's the only reason why I would do this anyways, because he'd stay up super late watching TV or carrying on. And this time he wasn't. I was like, oh, okay, he's asleep, so I'm going to go back home. And so I'm walking back up through the alleyway, and I was like, man, it's really late at night. There's nobody out here. It's kind of creepy. It's a little scary. I'm being honest. It's dark. It's scary. This anyways. So I'm walking, and I come back around, and I come up to my mom's front door, and leading up to her front door is just a little sidewalk. And I remember I'm getting ready to get my keys out to unlock the door to go back into the house. And I remember thinking in my head, in the dream, I was like, what if somebody was out here right now? How crazy would that be? So I just look back, I do shit in real life, I'm thinking like, oh, what if somebody watching me, And so I look back, and sure enough, there is a figure of a person based on the body shape, assuming it was a man, and he's in a white hoodie, a white pullover with the hood down. You can't see his face. White hoodie, and he's standing across the street on the other side of the street, because there's a big road that separates my mom's side of the street to the next side of the street. And he's standing on the corner adjacent, and he's staring in my direction, or he's facing my direction. I can't tell if he's staring at me because his hood's down. It's just black. And I was like, I remember being like, oh, what? Oh, shit. And so like, I was like, oh, this is kind of creepy. It's like 3:00 in the morning, and this guy's just standing on the corner. So I take my keys out real fast, and I'm trying to like unlock the door. It's almost like a horror movie, right? And I was like, oh, shit. And then I'm fumbling around. I'm getting the wrong key, because I'm nervous. And then I was like, this guy's obviously looking in my direction. Is he like a thug or something? He's going to try to rob me. And so like, I turn around to see where he was. And granted, this is within seconds, right? I turn around and see him. I'm like, oh, pull my keys out. And I'm like, shh. And then I was like, okay, where's he at? I turn around, and he's literally like right here, Andy. And then I was like, really? Oh my God. And then he pulls out a gun. And then I was like, oh, and I didn't know what to do. And like on either side of my mom's entrance, the door's just these big bushes. And so I was like, oh, he's about to shoot me. So I just, what do you do? Fight or flight? I guess mine was flight. So I'm jumping into the bushes. But he has a direct shot, and he's shooting me in the back. And I remember feeling it. After the first shot, it was like in my shoulder or something. And I was like, okay, he just shot me a couple times. He thinks I'm dead, and he'll leave, and I can I'll still be alive. but he unloaded the clip in me. And after he shot me probably more than 2 times, at this point, he'd shot me so many times. I know like some of these had hit my heart, and I was like, oh, he's already shot me too many times. I'm dead now. And I remember thinking that, and I'm just like hanging in these bushes, and I can feel the pressure. I've never been shot by a gun. I hope I never am. But the pressures of getting hit by the bullets, the way they would hit me in the body is the way my body was mimicking this in this dream. And I remember thinking, man, he shot me too many times. I think I'm dead. And I just remember sitting there, and I was sitting in these bushes, like I was floating in these bushes. And I just remember thinking, yeah, that's it. I'm dead. He shot me to death. And like, my heart is like, boom, 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 boom,
Yep.
boom, boom, boom. And it just slows down, boom, boom, boom. And it stops right when my heart stops, which would signify I died. I wake up in real life. And when I wake up, I'm like, I'm hyperventilating. I'm sweating. I'm hyperventilating. I'm catching my breath. My ex-girlfriend, she wakes up. It scares the shit out of her. She wakes up and she's like, Mitchell, what's wrong? What happened, baby? What's wrong? And I was like, I was breathing just like that. I swear to God. And I was like, and she's like touching me, patting me on the back. And she's like, what happened? You had a bad dream? Oh, and she turned the lights on. And she's like, oh my God, Mitchell, you are pale white. And I was pale, and it was cold sweat. And she was like, baby, what's wrong? What happened? And I just remember a couple things I was thinking. I was like, I touched my heart, because in the dream it was slowing down till it stopped beating. And when I checked it, it was like, it was beating like 90 to nothing. And then I just remember I did that, and then I pulled the blinds down. I pulled the blinds down to the window to my bedroom, and I looked outside. And the way the night looked was exactly like the way the stars looked. There were the amount of clouds that were there missing. It looked exactly like that. And the time it was probably about, I don't know. It was around like 3 o'clock in the morning. I remember looking at the clock, because I thought in the dream, I was like, oh, it's about 2 or 3 in the morning or something like that. And I looked at the clock. It was around 3 a.m., which is the witching hour, ladies and gentlemen. But that was one of the scariest moments I've ever had, where I wasn't doing anything. I was sleeping in bed, in my comfortable bed with my beautiful girlfriend, and I died in my dream, man. And I woke up hyperventilating. I've never hyperventilated for anything in my life. And according to her, I was pale, and I was sweating, and a couple of things I take away from it. I absolutely could have died. I could have went into cardiac arrest or something like that from that happening. I didn't, thank God, but I could have. Another couple things is, I think that based on what I said before, is my theory is, and I can't prove this, all right, ladies and gentlemen, I can't prove it. It might have just been a really crazy dream, and I just freaked out and my body reacted. I have a theory that like the whole concept of the astral plane was my spirit coming out of my body and walking around my mom's house and walking outside in the alley. Because everything I saw, it was because I got up and put a robe on, and I didn't go outside because I was scared shitless, right? But I went outside to the front door. I peeked across. Everything looked the same. I went to the side, and I peeked where I could see the alleyway, and I saw that street light. It looked exactly the same way it did in the dream. There's little gnats and moths flying around it. Now, somebody could argue, well, you've already seen it before, so your mind just made a mental image of how it always looks, because it always looks like that. Fair point. But I'm telling you, like, everything about that night looked exactly the same in the dream. And my theory, one theory, because I don't have I don't completely live and die on this hill. One of my theories is that my spirit perhaps was in this plane, this other dimension, and I encountered an evil spirit that was attacking me and trying to attack me. Like, I encountered that, was it real? I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe I'm just a crazy son of a bitch. But that's and from that point, another thing that was a little eerie, and then I'll finish the story. I have a friend named Ivy. He's a guy, actually. So when you told me your daughter's name was Ivy, I was like, oh, that's hilarious. Me and Matt have a childhood friend named Ivy. He's a musician. He's a singer-songwriter. And I hadn't seen him for a couple months. And then I had seen him, this was a week later after this incident, and he was like, hey, man, what's going on? He's like, oh, I wrote some new songs. I want you to check them out. And he played me some of these songs. He was like, yeah, I'm going to do a show. And I wrote these songs. And then he played me this one song. And he said it was called My Trip with Death. And the song was about, he wrote it about a man who dies in his sleep because he was shot to death. He told me that. I'm talking about this right now. I have goosebumps. Like, I've got goosebumps just talking about this.
This happens.
Yeah. My friend Ivy, like I said, we hadn't seen each other in months. I hadn't talked to him. Didn't tell him about the dream. The lyrics from that song was like, wake up, you're dreaming. Do you have those lyrics, Matt? Could you pull them up? You don't have them? It's if you remember, I think it's like, wake up, you're dreaming, and you were screaming my name or something like that. But before I could take my last breath, my trip with death. I had a dream I was dying, shot through the heart. Death was creeping up. But before I could take my last breath, my trip with death. Those are the lyrics that he wrote. So he wrote a song about a guy who died in his sleep from being shot through the heart. And that's what happened to me in that dream. And so, hey, is it all a hell of a coincidence? Sure. Coincidence happened all the time. Irony is a thing. Things are ironic. Things are coincidental. But that other part of me is like, ooh, boy, child. I don't know.
But have you ever had that?
Made me go to church that Sunday.
But have you ever had those moments though when you haven't seen someone in ages and they're on your mind all day and then they walk around the corner?
Oh, absolutely. Or you're thinking about them, talking about them, and they call you. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. These things happen.
These psychic intuitions, right?
Exactly.
Human intuition. Yeah, it's a thing. Sure. Yeah, and so that's one of my. I have a lot more like, I guess, supernatural or unexplained mystery stories, but that one is just one that really stood out to me. And the reason why is because you're talking about dreams, and this was a dream, and so that's why I shared it with you.
Just quickly before we move on, I've got one more. This isn't me. This was my sister, right? This is quite interesting because she was sat in the living room one day with the telly on, and she's playing on her phone, and she just slumped in the sofa.
Mm-hmm.
And she looked over the top of her phone like that, and in the middle of the living room is a coffee table, right? Now, our granddad on my dad's side used to love his glass of lemonade, and he'd have it in this pencil thin glass filled right to the top.
Yeah.
This glass was on a coaster on the coffee table because she had a glass of lemonade. And she sat there with this phone and then going like this, and she saw something out the corner of her eye. And she told me that she saw a shadow come out the wall, move right across the floor, knock the glass off the table, and go back into the wall.
Oh my God, what an ass!
She sat there with her phone like that, looking over the top of it. She saw this black thing just move like that, knock the glass over, and literally, obviously, the lemonade just went all over the table, and the glass was like on its side on the table. And she said she sat there for about 5 minutes trying to work out what the had just happened.
Yeah. Jesus Christ! What an ass shadow, though, right? He could have just left the drink alone, right? At least.
But I did to her. I did exactly what you just did to me with the butterfly story.
Yeah,
I didn't believe her, right?
Yeah. Well, I didn't say I didn't believe you. I just wanted to question you, just for the sake of argument.
No. You're questioning me. I didn't believe her.
Yeah. At all. Like you didn't believe her one bit.
No. So even though I saw the butterfly in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And also in 2012, I went to my friend's wedding rehearsal at a church. And when we were coming out late at night, we all saw a ghost. Literally, this blue thing. And it went behind the church and disappeared. So I've seen ghosts before. But of course, when she said that a shadow came out the wall, I was like, well, come on. And she went, no. She swore to God that she saw it.
This is your sister?
Come out the wall. Yeah, literally, she saw something flick out of her eye, and she looked up and she saw this thing just move, knock the glass over, and jump back into the wall. She was like, "What the hell just happened?"
Yeah, Jesus Christ, man, that scares me. It scares me now. Just talking about this is kind of scary. I'm glad Matt's here to protect me. What's your sister's name, Andy?
It's Sophie.
So you go up to Sophie next time you see her. You tell her your friend Mitchell from America, who has this awesome podcast that she needs to listen to, said that Sophie, that was your shadow. The reason why that happened is because you didn't sew that onto you like Peter Pan told you in the cartoon. You just sew a shadow onto him. It got away from him. That's what happened. That's my explanation. Boom. That's it. That's it. She should have sewed her shadow on. Peter Pan did it. Because if he didn't do it, his shadow was running amok. And that's what happened. Her shadow ran amok, was knocking her drink over. I'm joking around, but I believe it, and that's crazy. And wow. Well, look, man, wrapping this bad boy up. Andy, we've talked about a lot of crazy things, metaphysical things, which are super interesting. But you personally in your life, man, as a young man, as a guy working in this world, living in England, being a father, what do you personally wrestle with? What are your personal demons that you deal with, man, that you're trying to overcome? What do you wrestle with, bro?
Well, I've been an insulin type 1 diabetic, as you know, from when I was 6. So that's nearly 30 years this year, because I'm 36. Wow. Yeah. And it's been hard. You know, when I first started when I was 6, I didn't do my own injections. My parents used to do it for me. I think I started doing my own injections when I was about 8, 9. I started using the syringes to pull the insulin out of the bottle. Yeah. And of course, technology has then moved on. As I went through school, I was using the insulin pens where you put cartridge in them, draw it up yourself, put the needle on it, put it in you. Was always collapsing with hypoglycemia attacks when my blood sugar went too low. It seems to be a regular thing. That was up to about 2007, 2008. Since then, I haven't, touch wood, had any. And then around 2016 time, I was put on an insulin pump, which has vastly improved my diabetes control. Had that 4 years. Back last September, I got a brand new one, which just attaches to your leg. There's no cable or anything. That's improved it even more, but it's been very difficult. One of the things with diabetes is the change from your regular routine of alcohol, drink, food, that sort of stuff. It's a lot easier for a child like I was at the age of 6 to actually convert to a new regime than say someone our age. Yeah. Because if you suddenly become type 1 diabetic like our age now, it's very, very difficult because you've got all these years behind you of eating what you want, when you want, drinking, going clubbing, boozing, all this sort of stuff. Yeah, and then all of a sudden you have this life change where now you've got to start injecting yourself with insulin. Jesus. And there's been people that I've spoken to in my capacity as a diabetic where I've tried helping people. And literally some type 1 diabetics where I've said, maybe you want to try this, maybe you want to try that, trying to help them. They've got the right arse and ended up not talking to me for a few months, which I found quite. But when I spoke to the doctors about it, they said that it's one of these things. Because the human being is trying to get used to this new regime of doing things, and you don't want people telling you what to do. You're trying to get your head around it, and a lot of people reject advice because that's just how they are. It's quite sad, really, because from my perspective, I take advice from anyone. Anything that's going to help me improve. You want to take it on board, but others just don't. It's quite interesting. Not just that as well. I've had some confidence issues because getting the diabetes did knock my confidence. And so over the years, it's been trying to build myself up, and that's another reason why I wanted to do the podcast, because it gives you confidence to get your voice out there and get your voice heard. And that's always been an issue with me because I was always someone at school that never put their hand up for help. And,
oh, really?
Yeah. And it was to do with that low self-esteem, that voice at the back of your head telling you you're not good enough, etc., etc. But yeah, as the years have gone on, it's vastly improved.
Yeah, I always try to tell people like the biggest enemy that you wrestle with is yourself. You wrestle with your own head, your own fear. Like that's what you wrestle with. And if you can overcome that, then you can do anything. But the thing about that enemy is that because it is you, you're always going to be wrestling with. You always have an enemy. You know, it's like Batman and the Joker. Like neither one of them ever dies. They're always just eternal. It's like the Joker said to him in the Dark Knight movie. He said, "I feel like we are destined to do this forever."
Exactly.
Right? And so like that's the interesting thing about wrestling with oneself is you're always going to wrestle with them. So every day you have to beat them. And if you do, then you champion the day and you're good and you can have anything you want. You can do anything you want. But it, like what people don't realize is like they do that and they see that and they feel good and they see results for their own selves and their own life and their own success. But then like the next day comes or next week or next month and then they're back and they feel like again or they feel bad and they're like with us again. They're like, well, I thought I already beat this. Well, you did. You beat you had the battle. You beat the battle for the day, but the war is always. And that sounds grim, but it's really not because it's important because that's what keeps you strong and keeps you on your toes. It keeps you alive. You know, like having something to fight with.
One of the things that's like a personal motto that I've always had from when I was young was there's someone always worse off than you. And that has given me strength to do things because even though I'm saying that, and to some that might be, oh, that's a bit weird saying that. There's always someone, but it's true. There is always someone worse off than you. And if you can take that on board and actually use that, you can actually do wonders with yourself.
Wow. Yeah, I agree with you 100%, brother. Boom. Amen on that. And that's a cut and a wrap. We'll leave on that note, man. Brilliant. I like it. So before I close up the show, though, let me go ahead and get you to tell everybody listening, hopefully they've enjoyed this episode, how they can check out your podcast and check you out. Tell them about Decoding Dreams.
Okay, so Decoding the Dreamworld. It's on Spotify at the minute. I've also got it on YouTube under the name Decoding the Dreamworld. That's all separate words, Decoding the Dreamworld. One episode on there at the minute. Please subscribe. And hopefully I'll be able to get it on other platforms like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and all the others.
Yeah. Hell yeah, dude. I like it. Andy, thank you so much for being on this episode, man. I would love to go further, but we try to keep this confined to a certain amount of time. But yeah, in the future, man, we'll have to get on here and just pull a full 4-hour piece, man, between you and I. I hope you had fun, though. I hope you enjoyed your time on the Wrestling Diaries.
Thank you for inviting me on.
Yeah, and I'd love to have you back again, man. We still got a lot of ground to cover. Indeed. And as your podcast grows, it'd be really great to check in with you and see where your progress is also.
Hopefully one day you can come on mine.
I'd be honored, man. I absolutely would be honored. All right, man. Cheers, brother. Appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning into another episode of the Wrestling Diaries. I had my good friend Andy here from England. What part of England did you say you were from again?
A town just outside of London.
Town outside of, what was it? Slough. Yeah. From Slough, England, right outside of London, Mr. Andy Whittle. He has a podcast, Decoding Dreams. He struggles with having type 1 diabetes, and he's a dreamer. And what do you dream about? We talked about dreaming today and how crazy and how real it can be. I mean, what did you feel about the story I told? What did you feel about the story that Andy told? Do you believe it? You think it's bullshit? What and does it challenge you to look deeper about things? I mean, I feel like that's really important, right? Regardless of what's right, what's wrong, what's real, and what's not. It's just seeking out the truth. Even if you don't find the truth, doesn't mean you shouldn't keep looking for it, right? It's just like wrestling with yourself every day. You got to wrestle with yourself every day, and you got to win. And when you win, it's good. And then when you don't, it's bad. But either way, you have to keep fighting. And that fight keeps you strong, right? Because what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, ladies and gents. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please check us out. Show us some love. Come see us. Come listen to us. Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Check us out on YouTube. Like, share, comment, subscribe. Leave us a review. Tell everybody about us. And tell me right now, what do you wrestle with and how can you beat it? One love.
Filled with such pain, I'm shaking you to awaken you from this dream. You said in your dream I was dying, shot through the heart, darkness creeping up. But I woke you before I took my last breath, my trip with death. And I say it's nothing, tell you I'm okay, go on living life. Living life without a care in the world, happy with you by my side, by my side. Later on that evening, I lay down, stare at the ceiling, I slowly go and shut. I started dreaming, man, I swear I wouldn't be sleeping if I knew I wasn't waking up. In my dream I was dying, shot through the heart, a darkness creeping up. But before I could wake up, I was taking my last breath, my trip with death.